Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Happy Midsummer. Not the movie, because that would be creepy if we're just like, hey, happy Midsummer. No, but we are into July, and this, of course, is the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. And I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
And super happy to be back with you. Hope you all had a good Independence Day for all of those, for everyone who celebrates it. I'm talking to you, international audience. That's if that's not something that I'm guessing our international listeners probably, well, maybe they are. Maybe they love this show so much that they have a 4th of July celebration celebrating the Americanism of Joel and Ryan, because we are America's podcast.
I like to think so.
Yeah.
Although isn't there a thing called Podcast of the Americas?
Yeah, we are very much not America's podcast. But
we're unfortunately titled, I remember when I was running the like, this is once we had Carrie had the art done and everything. We're all like, woohoo, we're here, because we tried to name it something clever. We've told this story a few different times in many different ways, but they all seemed like, are we going to say that over and over and over again? Like, is that going to be funny at the third time, let alone like the 30th time, let alone the 199th time, which is where we are right now. Yep. And the answer was always, I don't think so. Like I say, it's like, let's probably keep this simple, keep it sort of socialist, like just say what the thing is, right?
Yeah.
So that's where we settled, and Joel was a good sport and went along with me on that, because I might have been annoyed with anything else. It's hard to say. But there was this guy, and he's not listening, so I guess I'm not worried about this story if it reflects badly on him. This is a good person. He was trying to help us, but he was all like, blah, 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 you got to have your own brand and everything. And I've named my company, and this is the funny thing about the story, is he's like, whatever, Integron or whatever this company's called, some non-word, businessy thing. And, that you can copyright and you can say, that's mine. You can't have that, basically. You see movies do this all the time. They make up words to put in the subtitles so that they can own the thing. And of course, he's like, and I've never looked back, and no one's ever forgot it. And of course, I'm sitting here now. I've completely forgot what it was. I have no idea. And I'm just like, I don't know, man. We couldn't really think of anything like that. And but thanks.
Yeah. I believe, my favorite was still, when I said, but it's like, oh, Joel and Ryan talking about movies whilst seated upon a couch. It was like, I pushed for having whilst in our
like whilst. And of course, while seated upon a couch, I'm still on the couch. You haven't seen the couch for, well, I guess we watched Blade Runner last summer, so that was the last time you were over here on the couch.
God, really? It's been that long. Oof.
Yeah, so that would not have been accurate in the post-COVID era,
right?
But And we do sort of strive for accuracy. We do sort of let ourselves off the hook when we go astray, though. So, but y'all know that. Today you get to hear us mispronounce a bunch of French stuff. That's going to be really super fun.
Yeah, we could do. Maybe we should do the whole show with borderline offensive accents. Yeah, we are going to be.
I don't do it very good. I mean, I try to, but people always give me a weird look when I do my French accent. I can still do a really, really spectacularly good offensive stereotypical Italian accent, though.
Sure. Yeah. I do a French Canadian accent, and it's really, really not cool.
Here's my favorite French Canadian story from the movies, at least this time, and that to really do it right, you have to do it in a fake Australian accent, because it's Robert. I can't remember his name. Robert Taylor, maybe. He plays that detective in the Rockies near the Indian Reservation on cable. I can't remember his name. He's a really good actor, and he was in a mountain climbing movie that Martin Campbell directed called Vertical Limit. And Isabella Scorupco's in it, who I think is Swedish in real life, but basically is like a woman of Europe and can speak, 10 languages and whatever. But in the film, she's French Canadian. And Taylor is explaining that to Chris O'Donnell's character, who's our hero of the story, back when, if you remember that far back when Chris O'Donnell was starring in movies.
Oh, yeah.
And he's good in Vertical Limit, but Taylor's it's like, hey, she's been here for how many years, and she's French Canadian. And some days she's Canadian, she's perfectly pleasant, but today she's clearly French.
Oh, I remember.
I just thought that was really clever writing for some reason, because I spent a good amount of time in Canada, and that's obviously a rotten thing to say, but it's funny because there's a certain kernel of, yeah, I know what you're talking about when you say that,
I was doing a show, and I had to play a French voyageur, and just doing and it was really over the top, silly, and it was one of the first shows that Ben, my son, came to see me in. He came to a rehearsrsal, and he was very young, and he did not know what was going on, and he did not know why his dad wouldn't talk back, wouldn't say hi to him when he would say hi to his dad. And then it was like, why? And then he was like, oh, we are French voyageurs, we will help guide you through Minnesota. And then he's like, he just turned, and I just hear him go, he goes, why is dad talking like that? what is he saying? So that's what I always think of when I think
for the art, kiddo. That's why why we make clowns of ourselves.
I give up
repeatedly.
So that is why we are going to talk about Luc Besson.
Yeah.
Director.
And that's not why, but that'll be as good a transition as
good a transition as there. The films of Luc Besson. I'm assuming I'm gonna put the accent on the second syllable.
I'm not going to, but that's cool. Yeah, please do that as best we can. I sat and watched the YouTube video where the French person actually pronounces Anne Perlou's name, which I just said it wrong. I watched it like 6 times, going, I got it. At some point, this will stick, and I haven't said it enough, and I just didn't hear it enough to really know how to say it. And I've thought even harder in all the movies I've seen her in. I've read it in print many, many times, with brutal English, like British type phoneticism. You know what I mean? So just nothing the Brits like more than just phonetically overpronouncing every French thing. They do it with glee. They travel to Versailles. Sure. You know what I mean? Like they just, I think they love it. They look at how it's written and they say it in English. And I think they really like the fact that they know deep down that they're butchering how these words are supposed to sound. And I guess
so this
I guess between the long conflict between the countries, I'm on the British side, apparently. We'll talk a little bit more about that later.
This might be a complete disaster, but let's see. Here we go.
Scarlett Johansson begins Taiwan shoot for Luc Besson's Lucy, causes media circus.
Luc Besson's. No, that's not right.
Well, that's an AI one? Anyway. That's not a person.
How about we go this way?
Luc Besson. Luc Besson.
Besson.
Luc Besson.
That's probably.
Luc
I mean,
Besson.
it is. We never seem to get him exactly right. This show's
Luc
really,
Besson.
unfortunately, going to be full of that.
I like this AI. This is what AI is good.
Luc Besson.
Luc Besson.
That's how I say it.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's how Americans everywhere basically say it. So, sorry, Luke. The show is for you, man. And you know what? It's kind of weird because if you can't discount Luke's contribution to modern films. He's the #1 screenwriter in my movie collection by a big chunk. To be fair, he really gets a lot of story credits, which is we're going to do this. And then he is a producer and a writer and a director, and he doesn't, he directs the rare film every few years, like every other major director these days. But he does, through EuropaCorp, pawn off different projects to different French filmmakers, and he makes lots of films in the English language that take place in France. And so he's got all these story credits, and they just pile up. He's just been part of a ton of movies. And the joke yesterday when I was attempting to tell Joel what show we were going to do, I guess it was Wednesday or something like that. Mm-hmm. And I accidentally wrote to our little support group on the line. So I just turned it into a hype post. Just did my best to I did this on purpose. I was able to, assuming a lot of you support people listen to the show, so now you know the truth. But I made the joke, the films of Luc Besson, part 1 of 1.
Of 1.
which got a chuckle out of Rob, who was the only one I thought who would really understand that. We'll get into why it's part 1, because it really is only part 1. And why it's part 1 of 1, and why there really isn't going to be a part 2 for this particular cat. I'll try and rattle off a bunch of my favorite later period movies of him, but he's a guy who showed in these first handful, 6 or 7, however many of them there are, real artistic and evolution of scope and style, and it just, each movie got bigger and kind of more amazing for a while, and then he bit off more than he could chew to some degree with the final film on this list. We talked about it. It's a countdown, but we're going to do it in chronological order. That's the way to experience a proper filmography, I think. Which it's still a really good movie, but then he just been reaching around in the dark basically ever since, doing essentially the same movies over and over and over again, well, with diminishing returns, which is what happens when that next big idea doesn't come or won't be supported. It happens to everybody. It happened to Coppola. It happened, where you just suddenly like, well, I don't know, what's next? And then you do that thing because you take the work because you're just happy to still be around at some point.
Yep.
That's a sad way to start the show, but.
Yep. All right. Well, hold on.
Luc Besson.
There you go.
Besson.
Well, why didn't we get that guy to come on the show?
That was a good one.
Besson.
All right. So here we go. We're gonna do a countdown of some of the films, part 1 of 1 of the films of
Luc Besson. Luc Besson.
9, 8, 7, 6, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2,
There's one simple...
Joel, what's up? You ruined the countdown thing.
I did.
What are you doing?
Autoplay got me. YouTube's
that
autoplay.
damned autoplay.
Yep.
I don't.
Yep.
It's like no matter how many places I shut off autoplay, which is every place that I can, it always gets you.
Yeah, I just didn't turn off the Luc Besson video fast enough. And so sorry about that. But we did get the beginning of an ad talking about how simple something is.
Podcasting, brother, Mr. Ad person who interrupted the countdown. You're wrong about that. It is not simple.
All right. So Luc Besson, this is also, this is a guy writes most everything. Okay, man, probably can hear all this stuff going on in the background too.
No biggie.
But Luc Besson is, as we've clearly said, he is French. He is a writer, director. These films that we're going to be talking about today are, he is an auteur. He is. I
think it's good. I think it's a good word to use for him, and his early stuff is the weirdest touristic stuff that he did, but there's always a bit. And this is why I really like him. And this is why his simple ideas have been adapted again and again and again. And his French films have been remade. And it's because there's a kernel of an idea there that's great. It's their quick, simple pitch meeting like concepts. And Hollywood loves that. But what they never seem to get, is that what's great about his stuff, and it's also what brings it down. Tonally, they're challenging, but what's really great about them is they're just full to the brim of just what feels like spontaneous insanity, and that's something that you just don't feel a lot when you're, especially the bigger the movies get. But even in the early days, it's like, all this stuff's just happening. Like this weird stuff just is happening. And it pulls you along for the ride in a really, really great way. And it makes things feel unexpected, and it makes things feel dangerous. And I mean, that's a neat feeling. That's, I went back and watched all these. I don't normally do that, but this first handful of these films I haven't seen in a long, long time. And I loved it. That's what I loved about each and every one of them was, man, these are bonkers. I mean, it's really weird in a really great way. And yet it's filmmaking isn't a spontaneous thing, It just isn't, even documentary filmmaking, which is trying to capture something real, usually still has this very, they're shooting what they expect to happen, and it usually happens, and then they edit it in a way that fits whatever narrative they're trying to tell. And when you write a script, or even if you don't write a script and you just sort of outline the thing, like with this first crazy movie, to make it feel like that, wow, that just happened, for it to feel that way is a unique talent. And to repeatedly to fill up tons of movies, to fill up 200 million, or I guess we don't get that far in this thing, but $100 million movies from the 90s, huge films. Right. And to have them have that sort of weird, quirky randomness to them is really, really delightful. So that's just to start off on a good note. That's the thing that this guy does, that in a way, some other filmmakers would do it, but he just does it in a way that it feels so natural, and and there's nothing weird or strange that's happened, right, that he sort of doesn't embrace. And that means that not a minute of these films, even the worst of them, is ever boring for a second.
I think that's absolutely I think that's absolutely correct. The thing that when I was thinking about I don't know these these early films, but starting with his movies in the 90s, he always keeps you as the viewer, keeps his audience off kilter. He doesn't, very rarely does he let you sort of get really comfortable.
Right.
There's always, you're always you're watching something, and like it's one of those things where just when you think like, okay, all right, what, and you're like, there's always something that just makes you like huh, and then you're like, and then you're back in, like, it's like when you're caught off guard like that, it activates different parts of your brain, and you're looking at things, like you're just like hyper watching everything, going, wait, what? And so even in his a couple of these films, which were big box office and big studio films, they all, they always do keep you a little off kilter, which is cool, which is good. I mean, that's clearly, I mean, that's you can make movies that are just like, sit back and enjoy and just let the movie wash all over you. And then there are other directors who are like, no, I'm going to try to make you sit forward in your seat a bit.
And I think it's more than like an agenda. I think you just can't do it any other way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he isn't going like okay, now what am I going to do here that is going to make, no, it's just, that's how.
But because I think if you felt an agenda of being poked at and whipped around, like, you start, even if it's fun, you would start to resent it after a while.
Right. No.
And I really do think that because it comes from a very natural place with him as a storyteller, certainly as a director.
Excellent point. I mean, yeah, that's an excellent point.
You kind of can't help but just sort of be whisked away by it, which I watched several of these in a row. So if I was going to get sick of that, which there's plenty of moments that make you groan, but never did I go, geez, well, maybe in one moment in one movie. So we should start the list. Maybe did I say, dude,
yeah,
let's not do all this stuff at this point.
I don't know what you're planning on using for the shingle for this episode, but I do really enjoy the poster for this first film, which is The Last Battle. And I just love it because it's like, it's a dude clearly in like post-apocalyptic gear and everything, but he's just sitting in a chair, feet up on a desk, while holding a spear. And it's I mean, it's like, okay, yeah, this is
Last Battle. It only has 2 spoken words in it, the whole film. And spoiler alert, the word is the same word twice, and it's bonjour.
Here's the little
synopsises that are really going to be helpful for these.
In the post-apocalyptic future, only a few humans are left. No one is able to speak, and the film contains no dialogue, and characters communicate non-verbally. A determined loner befriends a reclusive older man, and these two battle against vicious thugs for food, shelter, and life itself.
That was a good synopsis. I don't like that the parenthetical was in there. Of course, I just said almost that exact same thing.
I could have. Yeah,
I never like when they. No, that's not your fault. That's the synopsis did that. But I don't like when the synopsuer starts going. And then this is what I think, and what, I'm like, nobody cares what you think, man. Just what is it? That's what we want to know. Otherwise, that's a good one. It is a post-apocalyptic future. At some point in humanity's history, we have lost the ability to talk. The whole world has gone mute. So the entire film is like this. It's hard to explain. It's like it is a cross between. Well, there's a little bit of, like, I've heard David Lynch a little bit because it's weird and it's black and white, but I really don't think it's very Lynchian. Actually, it's more, it's like a cross between Monty Python and John Carpenter is what I would say.
Oh,
it is.
okay.
because it's just super goofy constantly. It starts with this long pan across this beaten, weathered, horrific, evocative, like office scape that's been destroyed by the apocalypse, and it comes to rest on a guy behind a desk humping a blow-up sex doll. That's the first thing you see in the movie. And of course, this isn't, it doesn't have a relationship with a sex doll or anything. This is a part of this dude's routine. Everything in this movie, no matter how weird it is just by rote in a weird way. And the film calls this guy the Man. We'll call him the Collector, because that's what he is for early in the films. He kind of goes out on these little adventures to find these things. And it's dangerous world out there. There's a tribe living just out of town in the desert. He lives in sort of a big high-rise, which he's fortified sort of weekly, but he basically keeps himself in a place where nobody would really want to go to the effort to go, is more his strategy. I don't know the actor who plays him, but he's pretty good in it.
Here, this will be the second name we butcher of the day. Woo! Pierre Jolivet.
A really decent performance, guy I don't believe I've seen in much else. Several of the character actors from this film go all the way through these, which is really, really fun to see. I think it's always fun to see a rep company basically play a bunch of sprinkled through a bunch of different movies throughout the years into different roles that utilize them in different ways. I think that's really fun. It's Luc Besson's a significant filmmaker, and this is his debut film. It was a festival film. It was beloved by many. It was despised by a lot. The humor and the sort of grossness of it. The fact that it's all these guys and that women, there's only 2 women in the whole movie, and they're both basically slaves that we barely come across.
The captain's concubine is Luke's the
made some,
name of one of them.
He's invented some really amazing female characters, but left to his own devices, he tells fairly manly stories where the women are treated in a really sort of antiquated and French way, and we'll get to what that is a couple movies from now. Because there's not much of that here, but there's that little hint that they're not important. They're like a prize. He spends the whole movie pining after this woman that because there are not many of them around. That much is clear. They're a rare item in this world. That he hangs out for this time in this lab with this doctor who nurses him back to health, who lives in this very clever, mechanically defended fortress that's really goofy and fun. I won't spoil all the little surprises of that, because you should, after talking about this, you should want to see Last Battle. It's bonkers movie. It's very adult, which I believe every one of these is. So these aren't family movies, not one of them. Just so you know, I believe they're all hard R-rated films. I think every single one of them are. And that's actually cool too, because you kind of forget sometimes that's not the history of movies isn't told with those anymore. The 70s a little bit, but by 1983, when Last Battle came out, it was post Star Wars, and it was all PG, and then the beloved, for the studios anyway, PG-13 came along, and that's where at least Joel and I growing up, our movies, our generation lives kind of right in there. And the R movies, they're there, but they're not, they rarely do they, much more rarely, sometimes they do, but rarely do they kind of penetrate in, because you still have Terminator, and you still got the big guns movies of the 80s and 90s. Those certainly made an impression. This doesn't have any guns, mostly bows and arrows and little slingshots and stuff. It does sort of have a bit of a Mad Max feel to it, but really just in the wardrobe department. If you come into this thinking you're going to see like a Mad Max like thing, you aren't. It really is like a French Buster Keaton in like really what Monty Python would consider an end of the world scenario. It's goofy,
Wow.
it's comic. It has moments of glory. We find out it takes a long time to get there, but we find out that he's collecting all this stuff and he's working on this old airplane. It fits him to fly it, but it's like a flying model airplane. It's not like an airplane. It's like a glider with a little tiny lawnmower engine in it, basically, that he's hoping will take him someplace different. And he steals this car battery from this tribe, and they chase him all the way back, and he puts it in. And then there's this amazing sequence for a film of this type where he escapes in this plane. That was the last piece he needed, and flies over this wasteland. And it's really glorious and interesting. And it's one of the truly haunting moments in the film too. There's a moment in the film where it starts for some reason raining fish. And the guy, our hero, is just ecstatic about that. He's trying to pick up the fish because it's food coming out of the sky, essentially, which is, so there's no question of maybe for a moment, why are these fish falling out of the sky? But after that, it's like, God, how do I have to get as many of these cannon? And what do I do with them? I know they're food, but I don't know how to make them. And he never really does figure it out. He keeps these piles of rotten fish around.
Yeah.
And it's not until he meets up with the doctor later that he fries the fish. But I feel like talking about these plot points out of context isn't super helpful. What's amazing about this movie is that it is, and forgive me, Rob, if I'm doing it wrong, but it is really like the Buster Keaton-esque gags and sequences. It's broad physical comedy.
Right.
In his first feature film, the great Jean Reno plays the aforementioned, the key alpha thug, if you will, as a loner.
His character name is Le Brute.
Yeah, Le Brute. And he wants to get into the hospital, and he wants to get this guy, and all of the collector, and the Brute's interactions are the hero of the story gets just the crap kicked out of him and is just barely able to escape. And Renault's great because he's got a nice little strange streak in him, but he's always been a fantastic sort of focused and single-minded actor. And I normally would say that because he can do real emotional complexity, but what I love about him is that he just comes in, takes stage, and kapow. And even in his leading man roles, he basically does that.
Yeah,
he's just a really amazing, and he's pretty amazing in this. And he's the good luck charm of the first, all but the last two of these films. His physical presence is weird. His kind of angular bird-like face, and he's just a fantastic guy to look at and to watch perform. I love Jean Reno, so this will be a great place to talk about him doing basically every kind of thing he's done throughout his career in these little types of films.
And he's also secretly very funny. He's also, not secretly, but like he knows how to use his presence also to do some very funny stuff. So I like him a lot.
Even in this, he's fairly funny, but he's dangerous. He's gonna kill this guy if he gets the chance to do it. And so you got a villain, you've got these other outlandish tribes people that we don't deal with a whole lot, but we do see their little mini adventures. We've got this strange doctor who's clearly smarter than everybody else, who has a woman locked up that he allows our hero to feed, but only if he does so blindfolded. It's weird. And like I say, that flying sequence is really wonderful, and like it's just, you're so grounded in the muck, and then when suddenly you're soaring over it all, it's this amazing feeling. It was really well done. Black and white photography is outstanding. This composition is amazing. The score by Eric Serra. Every single one of these films is scored by Eric Serra, who's most primarily electronic film score guy, especially in the 80s, as you would imagine, 80s and early 90s. But he's a really outstanding composer that has done several films, several English films. He's done a couple of the big Luc Besson films that were, like Joel said, were big hits here, but he didn't really translate to non-French stuff, his style. His biggest profile thing that he worked on was Martin Campbell, who we talked about already in the show, hired him to do the score for Goldeneye. Mm-hmm. When they were rebooting, didn't use that term back then, but when they were rebooting the Bond franchise. And the music for Goldeneye is fantastic, but it's been a lot of it, the action stuff, has been replaced with, they brought in the great David Arnold, another one of my absolute favorite composers for film, to beef it up and get the brass going and get the guitars going and get the usual Bond sounding stuff, because there just wasn't any of that in the film, and that made the producers sad. The quiet, atmospheric, the sneaking around stuff, Eric's stuff is all in that movie, but the big theme and stuff is all, that's all Arnold doing his John Barry impression, so that the movie could have something that felt familiar in the big sequences. So that's sort of sad part of Eric, but he's never better than he is in these movies. Well, I'll keep talking about him as we go through them, because it's I mean, I don't know how many movies it is, 5 movies in a row, Luc Besson, Eric Serra, Jean Reno, and they're really are like the I don't know, the only terms I'm thinking of in terms of threes are all super lame. They are French Trident of the early Gamin.
The French Triumvirate.
Yeah, Triumvirate would have been pretty good, although that's not necessarily 3. It just sounds like it. Hey, Last Battles is bonkers. It's really, really fun in that way. It is a weird festival movie, but if you consider yourself like an art house fan and it slipped by you, which I could understand. I have these first films all on, they were all released, thankfully, in England. I can't remember the name of the company who put them out, but it's all the same company. You see the same logo at the beginning of each of the discs, and they're all region locked, so you can't really watch them in America unless you've got a hack in your machine to do so. But it's great because they're all English-friendly versions of the films. You can buy all of Luc Besson's films because he's one of the most celebrated French filmmakers in the modern era. He's put upon, I think, because the great French filmmakers of the classic era are the ones that all the French critics that he grew up with adored, and he wasn't them, so he must have sucked. And they were really, really hard on him with almost each and every one of these. And this one, though, was such a trifle and such a small little goofy thing that they were kind of nice about it. It was interesting. And the American critics liked it more, which they typically did throughout this era. But the American critics didn't really get it. They just liked it despite not really getting it. Like when you read what they say about his early works, you read them just sort of missing the point and predicting a future for him that just absolutely was never going to come.
Right.
And a lot of them do it, and they do it in the same way. And I'm not ripping on them. I'm just saying they like the film. But it'll make an artist who reads reviews and who's sensitive, start to hate critics when the ones who like you really don't get you, and the ones who don't like you are absolutely stuck and rooted in the past and are responding to films in that kind of way. He says that. He says they're interested in, themselves and their egos and the past works and the history, and none of which any of my films are really concerned with. So the person who I care is the person who buys the ticket, sits down in the theater, watches the movie. What's their reaction when they come out of the theater? To me, that's that person just, that person at least wanted to like the film. I think that's something I've said a few times. Let's at least start with that.
Yeah.
But I check out Last Battle. It's really fantastic. It's really fantastic, weird movie. Even if it does have a few objectionable things in it, I think every one of these has something where you go, "Whoa, no!"
Yeah.
But that's also kind of part of the deal. Yeah. So because it does bum me out to spoil it. He develops at least something of a modicum of a cinematic relationship with this woman that he's helping treat and experiment on in this lab that this doc has cooked up. And when that all goes south in the climax and everything, he's to me in a cinematic sense, he stumbles across another woman being held in a similar, even worse situation, and they both seem really happy to see each other. And I always thought, well, then that other person wasn't really much of a character at all. I mean, you're just, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So the ending of it sort of bums me out, but it's par for the course. You got to leave with Luke, and really with films of this type, you have to take a step out of the safe space, and you really just have to do that. And you don't have to accept everything that you see. I certainly don't. You do kind of have to be willing to engage with it and not say, no, that's not acceptable, because almost every one of these films has something completely unacceptable in it. Some of them are really based on a really unacceptable idea. In fact, the best ones tend to be which, I don't know. What's next, Joel?
It is 1985. So, oh, by the way, the production company, is it Le Film de Luc?
That production company, and more importantly, because the story is the French film distributor Gaumont.
Sure. Oh yeah, Gaumont,
who were top of the world, and this guy became their champion until he started his own Gaumont, and then everything went to hell. His career, Gaumont Studios, like, it all kind of fell apart when they split the team up, which, hey, it happens. It happened to Van Halen. It happens throughout the years. You get your own little cozy place. You get your own little way of doing things, and suddenly you're not interested in a single other person's way of doing things. And it happened with George Lucas, clearly. Although George did try and bring in people he trusted to do his films and stuff, but they all said no, and he was basically left surrounded by sycophants who were like, yeah, it's great when Yoda says that. Oh, yeah. No, more things should fart on Jar Jar. That's really funny. I mean... Yeah,
in no way is Jar Jar's voice offensive. That's great. You should continue with that, going down that road.
I don't mind Jar Jar so much, but of course, that's easy for me to say. But those Asian-esque trade federation guys, man.
Yeah, the Trade Federation. Yeah.
Holy smokes.
All right. Let's move on to 1985's Subway. With Christopher Lambert, Isabella Gianni. A Seductive Fable is what this one is called. A Seductive Fable.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'll let you finish. I can't wait to see what the synopsis for this says. I really can't.
On improvising a burglary at a shady tycoon's home, Fred takes refuge in the hip and surreal universe of the Paris Metro and encounters its assorted denizens, the tycoon's henchmen, and his disenchanted young wife.
The first time I watched Subway, wasn't that long ago, because again, that wasn't necessarily an easy movie where you just walked down to the store and picked it up.
For sure.
I didn't think I liked it because I didn't know what happened basically when it was over. And, parts of that is Last Battle has no words in it. So the fact that it's a French movie matters really very little. It matters, but it doesn't matter in the following of it. People who really just like to follow the movie and don't like it when they can't follow the movie should never watch Subway, because even the Wikipedia page, I swear to God, because I went to Wikipedia, I'm like, all right, what
Yeah.
I have to tell people what happened, and I still don't know. It's the second time I watched it. I liked it a lot better this time, but I still am not sure what's really going on here. And I read it, and it really, the first paragraphs, like, it gives you the setup, basically the first scene, this robbery, and then after that, it's just like, and then a bunch of stuff happens. I've never seen that on Wikipedia where it's just like, dude, we give up. Then, we do not know what happened here.
And then chaos ensues.
I mean, this happened, and that happened, and this happened, but it just doesn't have like a plot that you can glom onto. It just keeps slipping through your fingers. So my advice to you when you watch Subway, and Subways, I just loved Subway this time, and I didn't really like it much the first time. It's just kick back. It's like a crazy music video. It's just the images and the thing and the characters and it's crazy what it is. What it excels at, and what even I couldn't deny the first time through, is that it creates this crazy urban mid-'80s fantasy world beneath Paris where any crazy thing imaginable can happen. The poster is incredible. It's a picture of Christopher Lambert, who stars in this film. It's among his best ever performances. Of course, this is right in his heyday. He'd just done Greystoke. He was about to do Highlander. If you consider those films big achievements, this is when Chris was, a star, basically, in Hollywood, just even if to a minor degree. Subway is very French. Everybody speaks in French. You got to read the subtitles to keep up with it, because I don't think you'll even be able to follow people's attitudes. Chris Lambert is weird, man. He's just strange, and it's hard to tell what's going on with him. And Isabella Adjani, whoa, she's just doesn't share anything with you. So if she's not speaking her mind, you have no idea what she's feeling. That's part of the French awesomeness of it and the mystery surrounding her. And Elizabeth, who I've known is great forever, and she's been in much better movies and much better movies. Nevertheless, her presence in this she's like this. It's just hard to explain. She just has this seriousness and this sort of in the moment kind of integrity. Well, it's like I say, not letting you in at all. She just not interested. It's not that she's standoffish per se. She's not interested in you knowing what's going on with her. She doesn't care. Yeah. And like anything in nature, or like anything among the sexes, or like just anything in our world, when somebody acts like that, you just like, we're drawn to that in some weird, wild way that the movies really often don't understand. They just kind of don't get it. They want that. They want to always be in that emotional moment. And, despite the purple lipstick and the spiky hair and the giant shoulder pads and all the 1985 stuff, this great French performer comes through all that in this amazing way. Jean Reno also featured in this film, which he's the other guy we have to mention. He's the drummer for this band that Fred is trying to start. It's really it has these weird non sequitur cameos throughout the film, most of which are drum related, and they're crazy and they're really, really fun. And you really think like he's going to turn out to be an assassin or something. Like he keeps you on your toes. He's not. All he is a guy who's waiting to drum on the right stuff, and that's fun. There's two songs featured in it, both of which I think are completely awesome. I can't remember what the first one's called, but it's the awesomest one. And then the big final dance number of the movie basically is Guns Don't Kill People, People Kill People. I don't
Guns
know where
and People. Yep.
Guns and people, yeah.
It's Only Mystery.
It's Only Mystery. That's such a good song.
And A Lucky Guy. That's just from album Pirates by Ricky Lee Jones. Those are the three tracks.
Is it Ricky Lee Jones? Oh man, I forgot how awesome Ricky Lee Jones is too. She's so great.
So this also, so again, this is another movie where, pardon me, there's only a couple characters that actually have names.
Yeah.
This is, and so we have Fred and Helena, but then it's like the florist, the chef, we do have Batman, Robin, Batman and Robin. But yeah, the drummer, the bassist, who is Eric Serra, the singer, the saxophonist, the guitarist. So it's like that they all just, there's no, no one is of name. You are just, you are a functionary of whatever the story.
The other
is.
main character in the movie is the detective, who basically is I don't remember who plays him. It's a really good older French actor, and he every time he's on screen, it helps a lot. He's not allowed to do a lot of fun things. He yells in a fun way at his little minions and at the people he has to interact with. He's a like, if you know the old actor from the 50s, Brian Dunleavy, he reminded me of like a French version of that guy. He's a screen bully, essentially. He's not a bully, but he just comes in and is the boss of everything, and you feel that, and that's a fun feeling, because the rest of our heroes are just aimless, wandering the underground and all these strange places. A lot of it was shot in the Paris subway system. A lot of it was shot in sets that were meant to look like it. I can't tell the difference. It's a really, really accomplished film visually. It's a really weird, magical 80s sort of music video world that is nonetheless creepy and underground and not meant to be for you to spend significant times of your life in.
Right.
And so it has that sort of, you're lost down here. You're, you know what I mean? And I love that about it too, but it's all slick and modern. It's not like the TV's, Beauty and the Beast, where they all lived in like the turn of the century tunnels and stuff that are beneath the subway system. Yeah. And it's the subway, it's actually the transit system that keeps them safe from the outside world. That's a neat idea too, by the way. But this is like, they're all a part of it. The trains, the mechanics of it all. It's really, really wild and crazy movie.
Yeah, Christophe Lambert looking like his best. I was sitting here going, man, he just looks like 80s era Sting. And then I'm reading, it was meant to be, the whole role was meant to be played by Sting.
I believe it. He's got yellow, spiky 80s hair. He spends the first half of the movie in a tuxedo. So wherever he goes, he's in this tuxedo. The movie poster has him holding this, basically a fluorescent light, which is like some sort of lightsaber or something. Trust me, it's not. There's nothing like that in this. There are a whole bunch of really funny, if you like watching people's pants fall down and people fall flat on their face and slip on banana peels, like Keystone Cops chase scenes. The movie starts with this car chase scene where he's like losing the chase and the cops are bumping into him because he's trying to pick the right tape to put in the tape machine. And then when the tape goes in and the music starts, he's like hot rod superstar guy. And then when the machine eats the tape, he gets all pissed and he loses his mojo and he almost gets caught. But he's saved by his knowledge of the underground, and that's really the story of all these people. It works very clean. I mean, even though it's pointless, I guess there's something of a love triangle in it, but not really. Mm-hmm. It works. It works because thematically it is very clean. Why these people are not part of the mainstream is very clear. They're different, and this is the place that they found, and this is the place where they gather. And like that part of it, I really get loud and clear and connected with much, much more. Like I say, the second time I watched it, hopefully Subway, because I think it's a fantastic film. Especially if you like 80s fashions and 80s nostalgia. This shows you what it was. It's so difficult for us to recreate that in the modern era. I think the 70s and 60s even more. And I think then the further back you go, the more filmmakers have a handle on it. I've seen very few 80s films in the modern era that really nail it. You know, like there's some things about it, Stranger Things, but they don't get it really. I think the best one I ever saw, and it took place in 1980, so is Super 8 by J.J. Abrams, because that movie shows what 70s wasteland the 80s were. All this leftover shag carpet and all this crappy furniture that chased us through, and that was an important part, like the difference between the crazy, weird, brightly colored three-tone sweater you were wearing and the strange olive green furniture you were sitting on and the old phone from the 60s hanging on the wall. Like that, to me, that's really hard to recreate from scratch. You just had to live through that to some degree. This film's lovely because it has a sense of that. And these people are very slick, very embracing the 80s. Eric Serra's bass is one of those really cool ones without the knobs on the top. They're on the bottom, and then it's about as big as a lunchbox. And it in 1985, not a lot of people would have. Now we know what that is, but not a lot of people would have seen that. And it looks like it's a magical instrument, like it's that's the lightsaber of the movie. You know what I mean? It that sort of thing I think is enchanting. It doesn't get old because it's so part of that. And
right.
Subway's great.
Sadly, Gordon 11 did not care for the film as much as you did. Sorry.
How did he sum it up?
Not enough drama, action, suspense, or dialogue. I was hoping it would be as exciting or suspenseful as Leon or The Fifth Element or Joan of Arc. I must say I was disappointed. Not enough. It's a
goofy comedy that it's just like the Last Battle to some degree. It's a goofy comedy that does have a weird streak of danger running through it. But I wouldn't call it a comedy, but that's what it is.
Yeah.
That's how you should approach it with your sense of comedy and fun. Because if you're not having fun, then turn it off. It never starts to make more sense or anything.
Sure. All right, let's go to our PG entry into the show today, and that is The Big Blue.
The Big Blue.
The Big Blue, the most successful French movie of the 80s, I believe. Yep. Let's see.
From a box
it
office
is
standpoint.
The rivalry between Enzo and Jacques, two childhood friends and now world-renowned freedivers, because everybody knows all of the freedivers. The rivalry becomes a beautiful and perilous journey into oneself and the unknown.
My girlfriend, back when this movie was out, we rented this, and she loved this movie.
2 hours and 48 minutes.
Yeah, she loved this. The American version was about 30 minutes shorter than that, which is what I had seen a couple times throughout the years because we had to watch Big Blue because it had dolphins in it, and because my girlfriend really identified with this was key. She really identified with Rosanna Arquette's character like a lot.
Okay.
But to her, the movie was about dolphins, and it isn't. It's not about dolphins.
Everything.
There's dolphins in it, no doubt, and our hero, played by Jean-Marc Barr, it has a relationship with dolphins, no question, and a relationship with the ocean. But both him and Jean Reno are these guys who grew up, in the same era and are very connected and do these free diving competitions. And free diving is basically just going really, really deep in the ocean, deeper than you're supposed to go, deeper than submarines at the time really should be going. And then just being down there, it's hard to explain. The best way I can explain it, and this is going to be a helpful, I think, comparison as we talk about Big Blue, is it's mountain climbing in the opposite direction.
There you go.
And I'll just tell you, I love mountain climbing movies because the nature that takes you someplace you've never been. There's always the drama's built into the thing. You just know you're going to have all these complications. But a mountain climbing movie is you trying to get to the top of the mountain, and then if you get there, you're trying to get down without dying. And this is different. These guys meditate down there. They become a different person. They become a part of the world in a completely different way. So it's you just keep visiting. You don't, and as he says in the movie, he says this to his girlfriend who just told him that she's pregnant. I keep running out of reasons to come back to the surface, is what he says. It's harsh. So it's hard. Wow. And he's not a dick. He's just lost in this. He's lost in it. He's obsessed with it. And the movie is about obsession and addiction, I guess, is what I would say. And to me, that's what mountain climbing movies are about. It's a great movie in Everest, which is a recent movie in 3D, Rob. Which is based on Jordan Krakauer's Into Thin Air, which is a fantastic book. And Krakauer is a character in the movie played by somewhat sardonically, but mostly journalistically neutral by Michael Kelly, who's a great guy to cast as this. And when they're all sitting around having a party at their final major base camp, the last bit of civilization they're going to see for a while, and having a toast or whatever. And then politely, the journalist sits there and then he finally says, okay, I got to ask everybody, why? And it's Josh Brolin, and then it's followed by everybody repeating it because it's there. That's what they always say. Why climb the mountain? Because it's there. Ha ha ha. And he lets the joke pass politely again, and then he says, "No, really." This is the part I have to understand. And a character, a climber, it explains the magical mystery, the amazement of it, the whatever, in these very poetic words to him, which he has to accept as an answer because it's an honest answer. But it doesn't. And I like these movies, but it doesn't. And this movie has the same sense of mystery or same sense of problem with it, which is that I don't get it. Once you go above a certain elevation, you are dying literally. The elevation is killing you. Once you go to a certain depth in the ocean, it's killing you. And every time you do it, it hurts you and makes you worse. Right. And I get that the view from the top of the mountain or whatever, that the mountain's some sort of manly wilderness metaphor, or that the deep of the ocean is this escape into this magical world where nothing can touch you and everything is peaceful and quiet. But I just still don't get it. And this movie doesn't help you get it. I never get it. And I'm always like, well, Mount Everest has got 400 corpses on it.
Right.
You died doing this for what? Why? The journalist, the author asked the question, the storyteller asked the question, and there's never been an acceptable answer. It's stupid. You shouldn't do it. There's no reason to do it. There are other things in life that are meaningful that you are completely sacrificing, whether financially or whether with massive amounts of time or whether with your very life, to do this thing that isn't even that special a thing anymore. Nobody's going to write an article about you in any sort of anywhere just because you got to the top of K2 or whatever. Nobody cares. As Joel very accurately points out in the setup for this particular movie, all those famous free divers, he says, no, you can become a renowned free diver, but you can't become renowned being a free diver. That is exactly right.
Yeah, you may be famous amongst other free divers.
But these guys are competitive with each other. These based on real people, one of whom was around at the time of they both of whom were around. One of them helped write it, the younger of the two. And Jean Reno's character, who I won't spoil what happens to him in the movie, but in real life, that guy quit free diving to become a politician and denounced the movie. But but like all Luc Besson films, this movie was never going to be some accurate biography. What's amazing about it, and there's a couple things. To me, what's really amazing about it is that you're watching a true story be told in this weird fly on the wall cinema verite documentary style, and yet it's the Andes in Chile, it's the Greece, it's the bottom of the ocean, it's all these exotic, amazing places that the cinematography, that the location shooting, that Eric Serra's score again romanticized. And so it's this travelogue that's really, really amazing. Our hero lives in this tiny room with a cot surrounded by breathing air oxygen tanks.
Sure.
When Rosanna Arquette's character leaves her life in New York working for a newspaper and goes to join him out of love, and he's all happy to see her, and then he shows her, well, this is where I live in this little closet, and you can just see the look on her face is like, well, this whatever, but she's smitten, she's addicted too in her own way. She's not right. She's a weird character. I don't know that Besson knows how to write for an American woman, so he writes this quirky, zany Audrey Hepburn kind of fantasy of a woman, and then Rosanna's left to navigate that and make that somehow work. And she really, in the early goings, doesn't do a very good job of it, because I don't think anyone could, because it's just written in this stupid way. There's this scene where she fraudulently convinces her editor, played by Griffin Dunn. Really, these scenes are fun, but they're stupid. They don't belong in a serious movie. And The Big Blue, more than any of the rest of these, maybe not more than the last one, but on par with the last one, is a very, very serious movie ultimately. Yeah. And so the zaniness and weirdness is the lifeblood that runs through it. This unusual culture and this strange way of doing things, but tonally, you just can't be pausing to have these goofy, comic, over-the-top conversations and stuff. It really takes you out of the trance that the thing otherwise casts over you. Because it is beautiful. The cinematography is amazing. The music is incredible. It's just it is worthy of being a big epic tale, because it does tell a piece of biography. And Rosanna, when she's got to play this exasperated, completely head over heels in true love with this guy. And this is how true love works. And I think this is probably what Jen really liked about the film, is that part rings true. Like that, I don't know why I'm with you. I shouldn't be. I hate this. And yet that insanity that is love, that just struck you with this guy. Yeah. It's tough, man. It's a real tough burden to carry. And yet it's like him. She can't quit him, and he can't quit this, even though it's killing him. And in the end, she has to accept that. She says, go find it, my love, I think is her word, which is a very French way of saying. And then he goes on this journey. It's almost certainly going to end in his death. Right. But he can't help it. It's obsession and addiction. That part the movie really gets. And it doesn't tell an honest biography of these people in any way, shape, or form. It just completely doesn't. But the way we're addicted to each other, and the way we're can become single-minded about things, like those types of people are represented in the story. The mountain climbers of the sea, essentially. And it really, and more than that, it just, the stylisticness of it. It's so magical and gorgeous when it needs to be, repeatedly, and you never ever get sick of going on those escapades. So I love it. And Jean Reno's really, really funny. This is where the funny, he's been goofy and weird and funny in these previous movies where he doesn't ever speak. But this movie, this guy talks a lot. He's always talking, and he's He's great in it. He's the antagonist somewhat in the movie, because from a freediving standpoint, he's a competitor, which these guys weren't, quote, competitors in real life. There wasn't such a real thing as competitive freediving. There were records that you could set and stuff, which the movie makes a go at. But it wasn't like, you know, all the freedivers show up in Sicily or whatever. It kind of is that, but it isn't.
Dive championship.
Well, they're tied less into the world of sports than they are into the world of science and, you know, other ways that people were using this, and therefore, and this is important, would fund it. And the movie is honest about that sort of thing, which I appreciate, because the authenticity of the freediving is off the hook cool, I think.
Mm-hmm. And of course there's dolphins. Let's move on.
And there's an American version and a French version. Yeah. There's a version in French and a version in America, and it's like a slightly different movie each way. They reshot stuff where they did the French people spoke French, and then in American, most of the French people speak English because that's their common language, which only makes sense that it would be that way. It's a weird case where I think, because there's some English dubbing of some of the non-English smaller French roles that I hate, because nobody likes a dub if you have any taste at all. I don't know how you got to show 199 of ours if you watch the dubbed version of stuff like it. But I chose the French last time I watched Big Blue, which was the first time I'd ever seen the 3-hour version of it. And this time I chose the English, and the English version I think is the better version of the movie, which is a weird thing to say about a French film. Right. But I think I really do think between the Greek and German, Italian, and American characters, it's their common language. And so speaking English to each other in groups, it makes sense that way. Mm-hmm. So just a weird bit of trivia.
Yeah. So let's get into the 90s here, and
when the 90s come.
Yeah, when the 90s come. And now we're getting, so these are some films that
we'll sing a different song when the 90s come, as the man says.
Mm-hmm. Luc Besson is starting to become the Big Blue was something of a hit and
huge hit in France.
Yeah, huge hit.
I don't know how it could have been much of a hit here, but I really do think Big Blue penetrated in America. Mm-hmm. Well, in a way these other movies didn't. It had a hot American actress in it. It had stuff that would make you go to it. Not many people went to it, but it was always going to be an art film in America. But kept it on HBO and stuff, despite it having quite a bit of French in it.
Yeah. And so, Luc Besson, he's certainly starting to gain some traction, and he does La Femme Nikita.
Yeah, which is just called Nikita in France, which is such a better title.
The convicted felon Nikita isn't going to jail. She's given a new identity and trained stylishly as a top secret spy / assassin. I like that she's trained stylishly.
Of course.
Yeah.
Hey, it's all stylish, baby. I hope I've gotten that. I hope in all this talk of plot and character, I've gotten across how stylish these damn things are. They are really, really stylish. There's no doubt. This is the slickest, sleekest one of all of them, in fact. Both main characters, her handler and her, you'll have to say their names for me.
Oh, here we go. And Pariod and Marc Duray.
Yeah, but it's Checky Cario or whatever his name is. I can never know how to say it. He's not Jean Reno actor who it takes the Jean Reno parts in American films that Jean Reno turns down.
This is IMDb is not helpful here. So we have Patrick Fontana, Elaine.
No, it starts with a T and his last name starts with a K, and both words are unpronounceable for me. I just tried to say it and failed.
All right, this is not. Oh, this is. not coming. This is yes, Checky Cario.
Yeah.
Bob. Yeah, playing Bob.
You know
Hey.
him if you saw him. I almost certainly would, because he's in plenty of things. And he's really, really good in this.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, this guy.
Yep.
He's Turkish.
Is he?
Yeah.
He's he's in only French and American movies that I've seen.
Born in Turkey, grew up in Paris.
Yeah, But it gives him sort of a unique, he's a unique guy. He's a unique screen presence. He does have that sort of different type of ethnicity about him, and he's an interesting dude. Nikita, she's a absolutely spaced out, drugged out anarchist. You'd say she's a rebellious teenager, but when it gets down to killing police officers, there's this, they rob this pharmacy to get some barbiturates and stuff, and the cops show up, and everybody, for whatever reason, would be pretty uncommon in France in 1990, but for whatever reason, they all have like Uzis and machine guns and stuff, and shotguns and handguns, and this huge shootout happens in this pharmacy. Everything goes bad. The pharmacy at night goes bad in a stylish way, no question. And she's got her headphones on the whole time. And so the movie Face Off rips off this idea that she's in this weird trance-like simple place where it gives her the magic power to sort of waltz through this without being harmed, all this craziness where everybody guns each other down. And she's kind of hiding behind the counter at the end of it when a police officer, and I don't know who this guy's played by, he's only in the movie briefly here, but this guy comes up to her, and this scene is always striking to me, and I'm going to just walk you through it piece by piece because it spoils a rather big moment that is unexpected, actually, but it's right at the beginning of the movie and as part of the premise of the movie. But he kind of leans down next to her, and he leans down, and he takes her pulse. And, at first he comes around the corner and he's ready to shoot another bad guy, basically, which she absolutely is. But he takes her pulse. He looks at her. Her head sort of turns to him and her eyes start moving. So we know she hasn't been shot because she's just sitting there still. And her headphones sort of slip off of her. And he kind of is trying to help her. And she slowly raises his handgun to his head. And then bam, and we go to black. She just assassinates this cop who's trying to help her in this sort of beautiful, touching moment at the end of this crazy shootout. Again, Luc Besson, this is why you come to these things, for these stunning and dangerous and totally unexpected moments. So from the get-go, our hero is an absolute murdering freak. Now, she's high on whatever and has lost her mind. And but that nothing ever really excuses this, unfortunately.
Right.
That said, she goes through this process. This is just gonzo performance by this actress. She's so off the hook in this. This is something Nikita's been, the crazy chick turned into an unstoppable hot female spy. This story's been told 8 trillion times, many, many, many times, a dozen times by Besson himself since this film. Right. It had not one but 2 television adaptations in America. I guess technically one was in Canada. And they all suck. They all are awful in comparison. Point of No Return with Bridget Fonda somehow it's terrible because it just doesn't get the insanity of this premise. Right. And the insanity, and this movie gets it. It's when she gets sentenced to life in prison, she's just screaming, you mother effers, just screaming. She has to be like carried on shoulders, kicking and screaming out of this courtroom. It's a stunning scene where she completely loses her mind. She's essentially tortured in prison and doesn't deal with it in any sort of way. She's weird. She's a young woman who cares if her mom knows where she is, but she's killed somebody cold-bloodedly, even if it was in some strange drug-induced trance state.
Right.
and isn't somebody that you really, although you don't like seeing people tortured or seeing this frail, skinny French woman getting brutalized and beaten by this huge, angry cop character. And she's given these injections that just totally screw her up in prison. And then eventually we think that she's died, that she's killed herself, but she wakes up and she's only killed herself officially. She wakes up across the table from the suit and tie guy played by Checky. And again, really, really knowing, he gets his moments in the emotional moment because he's an emotional guy. And I really do appreciate that about him. He's not, but with her, he's just this master manipulator. He doesn't care about her one bit, especially to start. He takes her through this stylish training where she learns computer hacking and she learns Taekwondo and she learns all this stuff about firearms. And then he puts this great big pistol, like in her little hand. It looks like this giant weird thing, and arms her with it as part of this training. And she turns around and points it at him and click, it just clicks. And he smacks it out of her hand and he turns around and he goes, the first rule is the first bullet is never for you, he says. I don't know what that means or what is actually going on in this lesson, but it's very poetic and harsh. And he shoots her in the leg, and she just, when movies, we've gotten so used to, I just watched Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which I loved, but people get shot in that, and then a couple seconds later, they're quipping and stuff. She gets shot in the leg with this arm cannon, and she just screams. And the film just like, all right, she's going to be screaming for a while. And she's sort of like spinning around in the floor, just screaming and screaming. And he's just standing there like waiting for it to be over. And somebody tries to help her, and she's flailing around so much that they just don't want to be near her. It's like this. Yeah. Again, Nikita, what it gets is the insanity. This is insane stuff. I can't remember what he says. That'll clip your wings a bit or something like that. Yeah. This is literally the boot camp part of the movie, which is the best part of the movie. Because the movie gets weird in French later, no offense, but she goes on her missions and they are interesting, but it becomes a relationship movie. She finds a boyfriend. They are living together, and the movie really does become about her trying to make the relationship work while being on-call sleeper agent assassin. And while that's interesting, it's a hard turn that this movie just is not able to pull off, in my opinion, the way it needs to. It's such a dark, awful, ugly, beautiful thing that when it domesticates itself and has relationship humor in it, like when you're on your honeymoon and you're in the bathroom pretending to take a shower, but you actually have a high-powered rifle pointed out the window at your mark, and your boyfriend's like, hey, what's going on? Are you okay in there? And he's starting to freak out. That's farcical. And the film just doesn't balance the farcical elements very well. But hats off, just 100% commitment by the actor in playing this crazy woman going through this crazy situation. Hats off for the movie for being and looking and feeling cool when what it really is horrible. I mean, it does a really great job of that. If you were, I had another friend of the same name who really connected with this movie because she was mad at everything. And this woman is just angry in a way she just can't even comprehend herself. Just lashes out in anger, viciousness and stuff. And yet there is some part of you, or at least some part of her, I guess I shouldn't speak for everybody, that does sort of yearn to be human. And once she gets off the drugs, does sort of want to have a boyfriend. And there's this crazy scene where she goes shopping in a grocery store and they give her a budget. She doesn't know what to do. So she finds this other good-looking French woman that just follows her around and buys like 10 of everything she buys one of, and is just sneaking around behind her. And that's a great sequence because it's weird and it's human, which the film needs its humanity desperately. But it's also just too goofy. She's a trained assassin now. She should be much better able to sneak around behind somebody than she manages in this grocery store.
Right.
And that sort of thing we're going to start to see more and more here is kind of what undermines it, those weird tonal shifts. Well, that said, if this film had stayed relentless as the first half, I don't know, it might be, it's already something of a classic and oft imitated film, but it might have been one of the best things ever if it really would have told the dark spy story. If you want to see an equivalent story, that's really great. That's a little different. This person's awesome spyness and revenge comes from grief rather than drug-induced, anarchy and psychosis. But nevertheless, dark spy movie. It's The Rhythm Section with Blake Lively. That was made by the Bond producers. Nobody watched that because nobody wants to watch something that makes you feel miserable. And I appreciate that. But when you have all this money and you spend your own money on a movie and all you made is spy movies, and you make another spy movie that feels as real as one could possibly be, I think that's kind of neat in a weird way. I think that's like these producers yearning to just skip the fantasy for a bit and give us reality. And I like Nikita, and I really like The Rhythm Section. So I like this stuff. I don't mind being subjected to this awful stuff. If it makes me feel something, I dig it. And this movie still does. I watched it again yesterday, and it still just makes you go, ah. Right. Until it stops doing that. Mm-hmm. Once it becomes, will Nikita escape her imprisoned life as an assassin? It's right. And I think a more authentic movie would know that there's only two forms of escape for that person, and one is to not exist anymore, and then the other is to really go ahead and shut that humanity down for good if you're going to keep doing this. And this film tries to find a happy medium, which I think is a cop-out, especially after the incredibly dark ending to the much more fun The Big Blue. Which again was changed, I guess, for American audiences, but the French ending of that film is like,
So now our next film is Nikita is, I mean, for Luc Besson,
the breakthrough. Fans, everybody loved Nikita.
Everyone, and then comes Leon, the Professional, the role that made Jean Reno as and frankly introduced the world to Natalie Portman. But yeah, then this is when he starts getting some major studios behind him and some major, or I shouldn't say, but like this is where like actors are like, I want to be in a Luc Besson film. So then you get like Gary Oldman, Danny Aiello, all these guys, start popping up in these films. So Leon the Professional, hilarious film. 12-year-old Matilda is reluctantly taken in by Leon, a professional assassin, after her family is murdered. An unusual relationship forms as she becomes his protege and learns the assassin's trade.
I didn't see Leon back in the day. I never saw it until I saw the extended version of it, which has all the creepy relationship stuff put back in. But I recommend that version because I really do think that whatever Luke says after the fact, or Natalie Portman's parents, or all the people who've had to comment on this crazy movie over the years, I really do think that's where the movie is. That's where the movie's at. I mean, that's where it's at. There's this underage hooker played by Marwen. She's got a long French name, and that was Luc Besson's girlfriend at the time of the making of this film.
Yeah, he was married to Anne Pariod, star of Nikita.
But
then
he was
started
going out with
dating.
this 16-year-old French chick, which in France is actually not. It's still something of slightly unusual, but it's certainly not illegal. Matter of fact, I think you can go quite a bit younger than that in France, and have it all be cool. So this underage stuff, which I maybe there were hints of it in these early movies. I just don't think there were enough women in the other films really to explore much of this. But this film starts out with that implicitly in a weird way with his then girlfriend, and then goes on to become. There's nothing explicit like sexually about it, but certainly to become an explicit underage like relationship movie. Jean Reno really does a great job, and Natalie Portman. I mean, Natalie Portman's off the hook good in this movie.
Yeah,
as a young actress who decides that she's fallen in love with this guy, her protector. She's at that crazy, weird 12, 13-year-old age where you really are going through things you have no comprehension outside of weird pop culture references, which she has dozens of, which don't help her communicate her feelings very well. But again, you've got this crazy bad guy played by Gary Oldman. The assassination of Portman's family is just fucking brutal scene of a film.
Right.
It just, I mean, him not showing the kid's head get blown off is the only moment of respite he gives us in this sequence. And that must be his idea of, I took one for the team, everyone. You didn't have to actually experience the carnage of that. But by that point, it doesn't matter because you've seen so much carnage. And I guess this is the cleverness of the storytelling, that you feel like you've seen and know the impact of that. And then of course, there's the imagination's always more vivid than the seeing the thing anyway. Maybe not in this case. I don't know. The point is, her sister that she doesn't like, her dad who's works for the mob, or mom who's sort of a typical obnoxious mob wife, and her baby brother who she dotes over are all killed by a gang of dirty cops, narcotics cops, of course, headed by Gary Oldman. I'm not sure. This is great era for Gary Oldman. State of Grace, which we talked about, Bram Stoker's Dracula. This is where he is. He's a great actor now, and I love him for everything he does. He's a better actor now, a more versatile one, a more emotional one. Like I adore that. But when he first came on the scene in the late 80s and these early 90s roles where he's really featured, where he just is crazy and you had no idea what he was going to do from moment to moment. Like, I feel like, not that I want him to go back on the sauce and be crazy and be drunk for all his films or live that kind of life anymore. But I'm glad that he doesn't do that, in fact, and that he's cleaned up his act, like on screen and off, truly. But there's nothing like Gary Oldman during his late 80s, early 90s era where he just is playing crazy people, because it feels like craziness comes from deep, deep within him. Even if it's Dracula's eccentricity, or it's this guy's huge temper tantrums or narcissism, it just is, it's hypnotizing. It's just as crazy, and you watch it.
Yeah.
And there's a great point of comparison between this guy and the guy he plays in the next film, where one really is like, whoa, and the other one is, oh, you're doing this again. And you can really sort of feel the page turn on this type of character.
Mm-hmm.
But while it lasted, I mean, I don't know. We live in a much more, and for the better, politically correct era. So I don't want to hype the crazy method acting so that you could rationalize and defend your own addictions and alcoholism in the course of creative endeavor. But Besson loved it, enabled it, encouraged it, caught it magically on film. And Oldman, because he's being encouraged and defended, is free to just go off the hook. And before we get back to what the core of the thing is. That villain character is one of the great villains of the 90s. He's up there in the top 5. He really is awful.
Yeah.
And yet his crazy fears and insecurities and paranoia does humanize him in a strange way. It doesn't make us like him or forgive him, but when you see that it comes from that crazy place, most of our bad behavior comes from that place of insecurity, truly, and fear, where we're scared and so we lash out, or we're embarrassed and mortified by ourselves, so we double down on the stupid thing we did. Like, this guy just is the embodiment of that bad behavior, and I related to that more than I wish I would have after the life that I've had to this point. But again, very violent, very hard R. But it's this tender French assassin guy. Renault, when he puts the sunglasses on and goes out assassinating, is pretty heartless and cold-blooded. But otherwise, he likes watching old classic musicals, and he has a very warm relationship with his mob handler, played by Danny Aiello, who's clearly using him as a tool and is lying to him, and we all see that. And the fact that Renault plays this guy, and that he's written as an innocent, that when he has this all too worldly and yet also a very, because Portman's character has seen all this bad stuff, has this awful, smokes cigarettes, uses terrible language, but it still has this little girl in her. And I just think Natalie's just playing what's there straight, and that's how to do it. But it's still sort of magical, because it is a really, really well constructed and well captured character. And in the longer version of the movie, it's more her movie, which is why I like it better. It's really the professional in the other one. In Leon, we're all, he has a name, and there's a relationship there. There's all kinds of objectionable stuff. There's stuff where he lets her drink at a fancy restaurant that he takes out to, and she gets super drunk, like, right away, like a little 10-pound kid. I don't know what she weighs in this. Natalie's this little stick person of a firecracker person in this, and there's another scene where they play charades with dressing up with all the weird crap in the closet to this hotel room that was left behind. It's creepy, man. It makes you feel uncomfortable. I don't think Jean is. I don't think Luc or anybody is saying this. Yeah, these two should get together. Whatever his other proclivities off the screen, and and whatever the actual French, systematically believes is appropriate or isn't. The film knows it makes you feel super uncomfortable repeatedly, often with the violence, but every single time with the innuendo. But their relationship is warm and magical, and you want it to work out for him. And his sacrifice is really, really meaningful. And her lost sort of puppy existence without him is heartbreaking. And so it all works. Leon is, I don't know if it's his best movie, but it's Jean Reno typified in this particular type of storytelling. Jean, because of the duality of the character, he gets to do it all. But it's Luc Besson. It's pure, like, unfiltered, unencumbered. This only could have been made by Luc Besson. It's been imitated again, but this story is unique and interesting. And I watched Leon the Professional, as it has now been the names shoved together, once a year, because I think it's every time I watch it is worth revisiting for some of the days. This scene where she plans her revenge against these cops. She finds out who they are. She shows up as she observes their workplace. She shows up as a food delivery person with this book bag full of weapons and stuff. And that scene, again, I won't tell you exactly how it plays out, but that scene has so much frail and fearful humanity in it by all involved, and I find it just amazing because of that. So I don't know.
Yeah,
there's objectionable stuff in it, but the film's self-awareness, I think, really helps. And he's wanted to make a sequel of it for years, but which he wrote apparently, and then repurposed for something. So I guess that idea is off the table.
Yeah.
But because of the aforementioned Gaumont Europa Corp breakup, Gaumont owns the rights to the professional and have as their revenge have not allowed him to make that.
Right.
And I think I was up all night. Sorry. I think that's good. I think this film should end where it ends. I don't think an adult, even with Natalie playing the role, which might be really cool, I don't think an adult Matilda assassin movie. I really don't want to see her still being an assassin. At the end of this film, I really hope she finds a human life to live. That's my hope when it's over. So. And if you can get to the end of this thing, this angry, cynical, violent thing, and feel that way, then somebody did good work. Probably a lot of people did. That's how it happens. Very stylish, too, Joel.
Very stylish. Well, speaking of stylish...
Luke, you feel like the word stylish really was sort of invented for him, because it's often style without substance, and that's often a fair criticism. Very often. But man... He's got style. He really does have style.
Well, speaking of style, next film is, this is as big budget sci-fi as you can get.
It is the most expensive European production at that point. It beat out 1492, which before that was the largest budgeted European funded film.
Yep.
A little over $100 million at the time. That was tons and tons of money.
Right. So you get Bruce Willis, you get Mila Jovovich, Ian Holm, Gary Oldman, Chris Tucker, Luke Perry, Brian James, Tiny Lister. Everybody.
Ian Holm. Did you say Ian Holm?
I did say Ian Holm.
Okay, because he's the
very
secret
funny
weapon of the movie, in my opinion.
He is absolutely. He's very funny. And it's The Fifth Element. It is here we go. In the colorful future, some would say stylish. In the colorful future, a cab driver unwittingly becomes the central figure in the search for a legendary cosmic weapon to keep evil and Mr. Zorg at bay.
An evil space cloud is hurling its way towards Earth. A selfish, short-sighted, violent industrialist is in cahoots with it telepathically and is trying to pave the way for it. This future contains a variety of alien characters and things, not in a terribly useful way, and more of a Men in Black sort of way, we'll say.
Sure. Yeah.
But it's fun. Lots of prosthetics, lots of people wearing weird old masks. It's all done very old style and very realistically. It has one of the world's best ever screen cat performances in it. Bruce Willis's cat has this perpetually like bad trip face expression on its face all the time, which I really, really enjoy. It was Bruce Willis or Mel Gibson, and it ended up being Mel Gibson was for the first choice. They got the right guy with Willis. Willis is perfect in this as this former military ranger guy turned, crabby cab driver of the future. He's really delightful in it. I mean, his American straight guy, like he gets that in a way that I think Besson gets it, but I think Besson if you'd had somebody like Gibson who would have bought into the eccentricities of the story, you'd have had a zanier, weirder, harder to glom onto thing. Willis Willis underplays everything. He delivers every quip with perfect precision. You know what I mean? Like and he's like us, like he's our portal into this world in a way that this movie has to have that, or it's not a success. I really do believe that. His love for this supreme being that gets delivered and then regenerated on Earth into Mia Jovovich. Sorry. In these two movies here that we're about to talk about are Mia's best performances of her career, without doubt. Right. She's so good in this and so good in the next film that you really think she could have been something special. And she's not that she's nothing, but you know, when you're dating Luc Besson and creating a different alien language with him in your free time, and I mean, like that would appear to inspire creativity in a good way. Whereas when you're married to Paul W.S. Anderson and you're doing Resident Evil movies, all of them, that would appear to, what's the opposite of inspire? Prohibit creativity? Yep. I'm not sure it prohibits it. It spoils it, though, somehow.
Stunts it.
Yeah, but I don't think it's the opposite of inspire we're looking for. It's the type of creativity that changes for the worse, not so much the level of it. Anyway, I don't want to get into those. I'm totally out of time here, and these next two movies are kind of big ones. But Fifth Element, y'all should have seen Fifth Element. I mean, if you're our age, you experienced this movie. It's crazy, cartoonish, over the top, whacked out, and bizarrely unexpected turns at every moment. It is full of soft humanity. The people, while doing terrible things for the wrong reasons, almost all of them, aren't evil. You know, the president of the universe isn't single-minded. His generals are stupid, but they're not. They're trying to do the right thing and defend the Earth. Luke Perry's character in the prologue isn't a bad guy. He's just really, really scared seeing something completely out of this world. So it's that stuff gets us into trouble. You know what I mean? But incredible side performance too. Matthew Kasovitz as a door-to-door apartment mugger.
Oh God, yeah.
Holy smokes, every second of that is funny, and I could watch it. That,
yeah.
And Baker, I can't remember his name, we just died last year, as the library cop in Seinfeld. Those two characters I can watch do their scenes just 14 times in a row and laugh at the same amount every time. It's so fun. Brian James is in this. He's fun. Christopher Fairbank as this weird scientist. He's the guy. Perfect. He's that guy. So fun. You know, that stuff's super fun. Mia Jovovich, super sexy, and yet again, and typical, and it doesn't change until we get to the end of this film cycle, is playing an innocent. She's just totally innocent. And this film's stupid in that it keeps saying that. It's like, yeah, she's the ultimate badass in the universe, but she has this strange, vulnerable quality to her, doesn't she? It's like, we're all like, yeah, we see that. Shut the F up about it. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, what? Yep. Why do we need more than one character to make that observation? I'm not sure. Just in case it's lost on us, or because at this point, with this amount of money being spent, you're probably getting a few studio notes that you have to follow.
Right.
The film's bonkers and crazy, but never boring. Very fun. At the time, it had the largest indoor explosion ever. The shootout at the end is really stupid and loud, and I get really sick of it, but it has one great moment in it where he gets some help from this upper crust guy that I love. That's Luc Besson on a plate. I won't ruin it for you, but you meet the guy ahead of time a little bit. He's just part of the elite who travel through the universe on cruise ships, essentially, and lives the high life. and doesn't speak the language, but when our hero really needs him to toss him the gun at the end of the movies, this dude's solution is really fantastic. And it's my favorite moment in the movie, which is why I mention it. My least favorite stuff in the movie, and this is the part where I got to take a minute. I know we're running out of time.
Yeah.
But this takes some talking about, is Chris Tucker's Ruby Rod.
Right.
In one way, I wouldn't change anything about it because it's like nothing else you've ever seen in a movie. The role was written for Prince, and Prince was going to play it, and Prince would have played it better because Prince would have played it, as Prince. I mean, he would have played it as Prince and not a cheap Prince imitation.
Yeah, and not a caricature of Prince.
Yeah, although it's not just Prince. The cool thing about Tucker is that he's an actor and he brings like 10 different things to it, that whereas Prince would probably brought in maybe 2 if we were lucky.
Right.
Just like Christopher Lambert is probably better, even though Sting is a decent enough actor, Lambert is probably better for Stubway than Sting would have been. Because it just has this actorly way about him, even if he's a bit odd. Tucker is off the hook, but it's great. It's one of a kind. Like it's just hard for me to complain too much about that. He's so committed to the craziness of it and the comedy of it, and everybody I watched it with the theater with loved him in it. But it does typify a problem with storytelling on this level that Besson has, which is that he introduces this crazy wild card guy as we're barreling toward the ending of a film that's ostensibly about saving the universe. And where it should tighten up a little bit, it goes off the rails with side stories, the weird reggae, everybody gets high and has sex, takeoff of the spaceship at the end is crazy stupid, and I hate that sequence. And the fact that Tucker gets all the way through the cruise ship exploding and the escape pod and all the way to the final moments in the final showdown of the film and is still there, doesn't help either. Like, that character's utility is gone. We don't need comic relief here.
Right.
But that's nothing bad that Tucker did. People often criticize the performance, and I really think the performance is beyond criticism. I think it's crazy good comic performance.
Yeah.
It's just really in the wrong place at the wrong time in ways that it's really tough for me and others to get over. So it is a very strange to have it. The point that I think that's important that you bring up, it's not that it's that this character is introduced when he is introduced, and it's just, I mean, it is crazy bonkers, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it serves a brief function, and then why is this guy still around? Why are we still, it's Tucker's a really, really good actor. He's not in a lot of movies I like, so I don't have a lot of chance to talk about him. But I would put this and his small role in Silver Linings Playbook as evidence that he is outstanding. I also like that he's rich and he just doesn't do every movie that comes across. We don't see him a lot, and because of that, he's still kind of a special treat, and we don't get sick of his more obnoxious sort of side of his comedy. But it's crazy. We didn't even mention Ian Holm. He plays a priest and an expert in interstellar phenomena. And he's basically the head guy of the cult that worships the coming of this supreme being, knows the language, can explain all the exposition to us. And we go back that we were out of time for Fifth Element, which is a film we really could deep dive and have a pretty good time with, but I don't feel bad because we did an episode on Ian Holm that you can find on YouTube or all the usual places, and we do talk about him specifically in this to a large extent.
Yeah, he's very fun in this. He's very fun. So our final film of the Luc Besson countdown is and this isn't his last film
No.
by any means, but
it is the last film in part one of a deep dive of Luc Besson. So,
but it is The Messenger, the story of Joan of Arc.
Or in France, it's just called Joan of Arc.
Joan of Arc. Joan d'Arc.
Jeanne d'Arc. This is not enough time to really go into this movie as well as I would like, but Besson's not interested in the history of Joan of Arc. He's interested in the psychology of her.
Right.
And that's a wonderful place to spend 2.5 hours with this insane religious zealot who, if left unencumbered by politics, would have driven the English out of France forever. It's right. Just history at least tells us that part in a million ways. Despite her persecution and ultimate burning at the stake by the Roman Catholic Church, she was later sainted. That tells you what the church thinks of her.
Mm-hmm.
The young girl who plays her in the early goings of the film, and again, Jovovich in her best ever screen performance, just outstanding. Just really, really good. Because Joan of Arc has been played as a militant by Ingrid Bergman. I mean, by some of the best ever actors. Who truly was anointed and assigned by God to do these things. I don't think this film believes in God. So I think a lot of what is happening takes on an entirely different meaning, and it shows the insanity and the real hypocrisy of religion at the time. Religion's a tough one. You know, we talk about it on the show probably more than a lot of movie shows do, but we don't get into the weeds of it. But it's a tough one, because if you do take it literally, you are embracing a certain kind of insanity, you know. And this show shows that it's not so much that she's embraced insanity, it's that she's been broken psychologically by some real horrors, and in her grief and trauma turns to religion and interprets the signs of her mental instability as in the language of the day, of the language of magic of the time in the 1400s or whatever, as religious in nature. She believes she's the messenger sent from God to cleanse the realm of France from the English who hurt her as a child, and she convinces the king of this, and the king, the young prince, actually, the king's not dead yet technically. The film doesn't really get into all that, but the young prince, played by John Malkovich, in a fun performance by him, and an understated performance by him, which I like. And the queen mother, played by Faye Dunaway, at an absolute ice cave. Just, when she's got the pointy hat with her like hair stretched back, which actually stretches Faye's sort of angular features on her face back, so she looks like she has this sort of medieval facelift. So severe and intense, and bravo for Faye for setting aside a little bit of dignity and just going for it to play this person. At first, Faye's like, I don't care about what God thinks, I don't care about what you people think, I care about what the people think, and the people believe in this crazy person. And that's why we're going to get behind her. What do we have to lose at this point? Checky Caro is back as sort of the general in charge of the campaign to rid English. He's a very pragmatic fellow who has this magic pixie dream girl of war thrust upon his campaign. It's a very delightful performance. Really great. Timothy West is great as a priest, a bishop or whatever at the end of the movie, who really wants to do the right thing but is prohibited. There's a heartbreaking moment where she's just been beaten in prison and she's begging him, please hear my confession, because she's going to be burnt the next day.
Right.
And you can see where his duty and his belief system says there's nothing better that I could do in this moment, nothing more kind, more Christian that I could do, and yet he's prohibited to because she's been uncommunicated. And he says, I cannot. And it hurts. It hurts your soul. Yeah. So many good performances. Desmond Harrington is great in this as her sort of confidant. Oh, the soldier who talks like this. I can't remember that guy's name. He's fantastic in it. He's just really fun in it, and it keeps things feeling light when things are super intense. Eddie Marsan as the head of the Brits is really fun too. But you can't talk about Messenger Joan of Arc without talking about Dustin Hoffman. Whoa. Yeah. And that's where this movie goes from being really good to being really pretty awesome. It's also, I think, where it jumped the shark into this isn't going to be the big historical hit that they're hoping it would be. Braveheart and such, Gladiator, that stuff hadn't come out yet. So this revival of the old, Gus called them all sword and sandal movies. Not a lot of sandals in this one, unless you really want your feet to be completely traumatized. But plenty of swords, no doubt. One really important one left in an empty field for a young French girl to find. Dustin Hoffman arrives to her, and what is he? It's such a cool question that the movie doesn't answer. Is he her conscience somehow? It feels like it. But if it's part of her, it sure is being mean to her. During her trials, because what happens is, and it's long story short, what happens is she does everything she says she's going to do. She becomes a legend, but diplomacy and politics kind of get in the way. And when they need to rein her in, they want to use her as a figurehead, but they don't want her to be at war anymore. And her going to war and rallying the troops is like really, really inconvenient for the French. She gets arrested and ultimately captured by the English, and the English hate her and they completely mistreat her while she's captive, and they put her on trial and burn her at the stake. But during her trial, and her trial is fantastic, medieval courtroom drama is how this movie ends, and it's just outstanding. Her belief, Joan's force of will, her unstoppable inner belief in what she's doing and what she thinks, and her purpose and the force of will to make it happen at all costs. That's an amazing thing to spend 2.5 hours with. And Dustin is so fantastic in that little role as that just judgmental archangel who comes to her in her final moments where she needs relief and kindness, and just gives her the riot act, gives her the real trial. I love it. I don't know why. I love that it's steeped in religion. I think it's just a wonderful film. I get why it was really expensive and it didn't do super well. It did well enough again in Europe. It did, and it made a dent here. But Fifth Element, as Joel said, was a big box office smash, big summer event movie, and this could never have been that. Right. That's what's great about it. If they'd have made a Joan of Arc movie that was more like Braveheart, you didn't add anything. This film really has the core, that deep, tragic core of what she was all about, and how, in even being sainted, how ridiculously misunderstood she was. She's been diagnosed all these years later as what was likely going on with her. I'm not going to mention what that is. I like that they are still examining her. Right. But the outcast in our society, in a time where that steadfast belief in God and the fact that religion was such a part of our political and everyday lives, and the fact that she's the most religious person in the film, and that when that has served its purpose, she's cast out and ultimately judged by the hypocrisy of religion itself. I just find that this awesome. So I like that. I've seen a lot of them, and there's a lot of good ones. This is by far my favorite Joan of Arc movie because of the psychological and emotional complexity involved.
The only better Joan of Arc character is in the show Clone High. I think we can all agree.
Well, Clone High is pretty awesome. As we've also previously discussed.
Yeah. So that does it for part one of a look at the films of Luc Besson, and look, these movies. There's a lot that can be said about Luc Besson, and a lot that is you can question about Luc Besson, and he has lots of things, and we don't talk. There's a reason why we're not talking about his later films.
Well, they're not all garbage, but boom, 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 boom. You just see it getting bigger, more grandiose, and more Bessonic as it goes. And the later ones, they're not all crap. I was going to talk about them, but I ran out of time. I was going to at least list them and say, this is this is that. Mm-hmm. There's good stuff in there, but it's not the same. He rose as high as he was ever going to get. He did ultimately make a bigger, more expensive movie than The Messenger, but artistically he peaked here clearly and has been looking for a way to continue admirably, but with diminishing results ever since. That's just the breaks.
Right.
Much like Coppola after Apocalypse Now, there was nowhere to go but down.
Right.
And then when you're down there, what do? You just keep trying. Good for him. Good for both of them.
So so check these films out. Don't especially I'm going to go and check out the first couple films because I was not familiar with them, and they sound bonkers, and I there's room in the world for some bonkers films. But that is going to do it for us for this week. And the next episode, this is 199. Next episode is in 2 weeks because that is how long it's going to take me to prepare for episode 200.
Can you believe it?
Can you believe it? So in advance of 200, thank you everybody who has been listening and supportive of the show. And you can reach out to us at all the different places on social media. You know where we are. You know what? Make sure that you review us on Apple Podcasts. Give us a little bit of like, hey, these guys have been around for 199 episodes. They themselves are somewhat Bessonic, because I really like that you just coined that phrase. All right, that is going to do it for us for this week. Thank you, everybody. Take care of yourselves and come back and join us for 200.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joe and Ryan.
Sorry.
Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.